Father's Day used to be my favorite day of the year, not because of the gifts or the fancy dinners, but because it reminded me that all the sacrifices I made over the last 36 years had been worth something. At least that's what I believed, until my own son looked me in the eyes and said 6 words that changed our relationship forever. "I wish you'd never been my dad. My name is Michael Whitaker. I'm 67 years old and live in Scottsdale, Arizona. 30 years ago, I buried my wife after she lost her battle with breast cancer. Our son, Ethan, was only 7 years old at the time. For the next 2 decades, my entire world revolved around him. I never remarried. I missed promotions because I refused to travel for work. I spent countless nights helping him build science projects and teaching him how to ride a bicycle. I attended every baseball game, every school play, and every graduation ceremony. When Ethan wanted to study business at Stanford, I quietly sold the lake house my wife and I had planned to retire in. He never knew. When he wanted to launch his own consulting company at 28, I invested nearly $500,000 without asking for a single percentage of ownership. He never knew that either. The truth is, I never wanted my son to know how much I sacrificed for him. That's what fathers do. We don't keep score. 3 years ago, Ethan married Vanessa. She was intelligent, ambitious, and knew exactly what she wanted from life. Unfortunately, one of those things was complete control over my son's relationship with me. At first, the comments were subtle. "Michael, don't spoil Ethan so much. You really should let him make his own decisions. He's not a little boy anymore." Eventually, those comments turned into something else. "Your father is too involved in our lives. He thinks money gives him the right to control everything. You need to stop letting him treat you like you're 12 years old." The irony was almost amusing. I had spent 30 years giving my son everything without expecting anything in return, and somehow I had become the controlling parent. Still, I kept my distance. I called less often. I stopped offering advice unless Ethan asked for it. I thought I was respecting his boundaries. What I didn't realize was that resentment had been quietly growing inside my own son for years. This year's Father's Day was supposed to be simple. Ethan invited me to dinner at his house. He told me it was just close family, a small celebration to thank me for everything I'd done over the years. I arrived carrying a bottle of wine and a small photo album I had spent weeks putting together. It contained pictures of every important moment in Ethan's life: his first day of kindergarten, his college graduation, the day he received the keys to his first office, and a photograph of us standing beside the Porsche I had purchased 5 years ago, the same Porsche he had been driving for nearly 2 years. I had no idea that photo would become painfully ironic before the night was over, because Father's Day wasn't a celebration. It was an ambush. The moment I walked through Ethan's front door, I realized something felt different. The dining room wasn't set for a quiet family dinner. There were nearly 15 people gathered inside the house. Vanessa's parents were there. Her brother and sister-in-law sat near the fireplace. Several of Ethan's closest friends stood around laughing while holding glasses of champagne. "Dad," Ethan smiled as he hugged me. "Happy Father's Day." For a moment I felt relieved. Perhaps I had been overthinking things. "Looks like quite a celebration," I laughed. "It is," Vanessa replied. "Tonight is very special." I handed Ethan the photo album and the bottle of wine before taking my seat. Dinner began pleasantly enough. Everyone shared stories about their fathers and spoke about the people who helped shape their lives. I found myself smiling as I watched Ethan laughing with his friends. Maybe I had worried for nothing. Then Vanessa's father raised his glass. "To Ethan," he said proudly. "One of the most successful young entrepreneurs I've ever met." Everyone applauded. He continued, "Your generation inspires me. You've built an incredible life for yourself." I noticed Ethan smiling proudly. Then Vanessa spoke. "Honestly, Ethan built everything he has through hard work. No shortcuts, no handouts." Several guests nodded approvingly. I didn't say a word. Then Ethan laughed softly, before adding something that immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. "Well, I certainly learned one thing growing up." "And what's that?" one of his friends asked. He looked directly at me before smiling. What kind of father I never wanted to become. The room suddenly became silent. I laughed nervously, assuming he was joking. He wasn't. Growing up with an emotionally controlling father, isn't exactly something people talk about openly," he continued. "Everything always came with expectations." My smile slowly disappeared. Expectations? I had spent 30 years asking for absolutely nothing in return. Vanessa gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "Tell them what you've always told me." He took a sip of his wine before saying the words that shattered me. "Honestly, I wish you'd never been my dad. I wish you'd never been my dad." I could almost hear my late wife's voice asking me whether I had heard him correctly. The entire room froze. Vanessa's mother looked uncomfortable. A few of Ethan's friends quietly glanced toward me. "Ethan," I said softly, "why would you say something like that?" "Because it's true." He stood up from his chair and continued speaking. "You've spent your entire life buying your way into people's gratitude. You think paying for things makes you a good father." "No," I replied calmly. "I think loving your child makes you a good father." He laughed bitterly. "Love? You call controlling every major decision in my life love?" I genuinely didn't understand what he was talking about. "Name one decision I've ever controlled." He couldn't. Instead, Vanessa immediately stepped in. "You always made Ethan feel indebted to you. Did I ever ask him to pay me back for anything?" "No, but he knew you expected it." The irony was almost unbelievable. For 30 years, I had sacrificed everything so my son would never feel burdened by what I gave him, and somehow my silence had become manipulation. I slowly stood up and looked around the dining room. The photograph album sat unopened beside Ethan's plate. Inside were 30 years of memories, memories that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else's family. Then Ethan said something that broke whatever was left of my heart. "You know what Father's Day should be about? Celebrating fathers who actually deserve it." I smiled sadly. "You're absolutely right." For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then I picked up my suit jacket and quietly said the only thing that came to mind. "Then live as if you never had a father." The room went completely silent. I walked toward the front door without raising my voice or looking back. As I reached my Porsche parked in the driveway, Ethan shouted after me, "Oh, and leave the Porsche here. You promised I'd eventually keep it anyway." I stopped walking and smiled softly. Funny, some promises are only meant for sons who still want fathers. I quietly opened the driver's door and drove away. 20 minutes later, my phone vibrated with a text message from Ethan. "Bring my car back right now." 5 minutes later, another message appeared. "If you don't return it tonight, I'm calling the police." I stared at my phone for several seconds before laughing quietly to myself. The Porsche wasn't his, and by tomorrow morning, he was going to discover that wasn't the only thing he had been mistaken about. Audience question. If your child publicly told you, "I wish you'd never been my father," would you ever forgive them? Comment never or I would forgive. The police arrived at my house at exactly 9:15 the following morning. I had just finished watering the roses my late wife planted nearly 20 years ago when a patrol car pulled into my driveway. One of the officers approached me politely. "Good morning, sir. We received a report regarding a stolen vehicle, a silver Porsche 911. "That would be mine," I replied with a smile. Before he could say another word, Ethan's black SUV came speeding into my driveway. He stepped out looking furious. "Officer, that's my car. He took it after Father's Day dinner." The officer turned toward me. "Sir, do you have proof of ownership?" Without saying a word, I walked inside and returned with a small leather folder. Inside were the vehicle title, the registration documents, the insurance policy, the original purchase agreement bearing only one name, Michael Whitaker. The officer spent less than 30 seconds reviewing the documents before looking back at my son. "Sir, this vehicle legally belongs to your father." Ethan immediately turned pale. "But he promised it would be mine someday." The officer smiled politely. "A future promise doesn't constitute legal ownership." Then something unexpected happened. The officer asked Ethan a simple question. "Why would you report a stolen vehicle if you knew it belonged to your father?" For the first time since arriving, Ethan had nothing to say. After the officers left, he finally looked at me. "So this is revenge?" I shook my head. "No, son. Revenge would have been embarrassing you at dinner last night. This is simply reality." I invited him to sit on the porch, the same porch where I had taught him how to tie his shoes when he was 5 years old. You said something yesterday that I've thought about all night, I told him. I wish you'd never been my father. He lowered his eyes. Well, today you got your wish. I handed him an envelope containing the documents for every financial gift I had quietly provided throughout his adult life. His business investment, his emergency loans that I never asked to be repaid, and the monthly payments I had still been making toward his office lease. I have spent years believing I used money to control you, I said softly. The truth is I used it to protect you. Tears filled his eyes for the first time. You didn't lose a Porsche yesterday, Ethan. You lost something far more valuable, a father who spent 30 years loving you without keeping score. Because Father's Day taught me something I should have learned years ago. You can give your children everything, but you cannot make them value it.